I'm doing a story about the 6 games that will shape how the Eastern Division is won. And Michigan State's actually won 9 of the last 13 games in that rivalry. We forget Mark D'Antonio was renting Michigan with an option to buy, I think, when his tenure came to its forgettable close there a year or two ago. But Tucker came right in and served notice last year that he's not the guy that they can steal on. So, you know, Michigan's going to have it hard against that guy and that team going forward, I think, because he's going to get good players in there, whether it's transfer portal or high school recruiting. And I think Michigan State's here to stay under Mel Tucker.
How long is Mel Tucker here to stay, though?
Yeah, he's being rumored for LSU. I saw that. Of course, our guy at Penn State is now being rumored for USC and LSU, and on it goes. So yeah, it's quite a carousel out there.
They did pretty well there at LSU, going after a Michigan State coach one other time.
Yes, once before.
All right. To my recollection, that 2015 Michigan State game, I'm guessing that Sparty was undefeated because they lost a little bit later, I believe, to Nebraska. I think that game was later, and Michigan would have had 1 loss. So that might have been like roughly a 7-0, 6-1 game, because then Michigan, of course, the punter couldn't catch the snap nor just learn to fall on it.
Kids.
And so that was loss number 2. Then they lost to the Buckeyes, of course, at the end. All right. Thank you for that, Bobby. Appreciate that. Sue chimes in with the rankings that came out, of course, yesterday, with the Buckeyes at number 5. Thoughts on being ranked 5th? I don't see the 4 teams ahead of us losing a game. Maybe Oklahoma. Please tell me an undefeated Cincy does not get in the college football playoff ahead of an Ohio State 1-loss Big Ten championship team. We'll start with you, Tony.
Yeah, like I don't pay a lot of attention to the rankings, and I don't know necessarily how many teams move up and down this early. But the Cincinnati thing, they have done everything they've been asked to do to make the playoffs. They've scheduled and beaten Notre Dame and Indiana. However, neither of those teams are as good as people thought they were going to be coming into the season. So both of those wins have been greatly diminished. Ohio State will have a same opponent with Indiana, and if they do better against Indiana than what Cincinnati did, then that is something the committee is going to look at. It's going to be interesting to watch the voters, how much they will trickle Cincinnati down on their ballot, and gradually other teams will move ahead of them. But when you look at their body of work, their best wins are now just Notre Dame, because you can't even consider Indiana a best win. It's a win against a Power 5 opponent, but it might as well be Missouri or, Duke, basically. I mean, these are all similar. Like, those teams have nothing of value. They've done nothing of worth this season. And so I guess you see if Ohio State beats Indiana 52-7 and Cincinnati needed a fourth quarter miracle, that kind of means something to a committee that doesn't necessarily want to put Cincinnati in and does necessarily want to put Ohio State in if they're being forced to choose between those two. So the committee can use whatever of their different ingredients that they want. They can put whatever weight to them. And if they don't want to have Cincinnati in there and they do want to have Ohio State in there, they're going to put a lot of weight into the similar opponents and the fact that Notre Dame isn't nearly the team that everybody thought they would. Not that Kevin Noon thought they'd be anything with Jack Cohn as their starting quarterback.
Exactly. I'm looking here at College Poll Tracker, which has the votes, the individual votes of the AP writers, and you have 2 writers that have Ohio State second. You have 1 writer that has Ohio State 11th. There's just some lunacy going on with people having Iowa still ahead of Ohio State, even though Ohio State lost to a then number 11 Oregon team by 7 at home, whereas Iowa got beat at home by an unranked Purdue team by multiple scores. But, Cincinnati, to take this off of Cincinnati, Alabama and Georgia are going to play each other again unless craziness ensues in the SEC. And if craziness does take grip, then it's a moot point at that point. So the nightmare scenario, I guess, is now that Bama has a loss and UGA doesn't. UGA runs the table. Alabama beats them by 3. And then it's like, well, how do you punish Alabama at that point? So I don't know if I'm ready to say 2 SEC teams are going to happen. And I'm not convinced anybody on Georgia's schedule is going to knock off the Bulldogs right now, just based on the softness of the SEC East. I'm not buying on Auburn knocking off Alabama. I mean, the greatest thing that could happen for Ohio State and pretty much everybody not rooting for Alabama is Alabama to get a second loss.
Yep.
But as for Cincinnati, yeah, they've done everything that's been asked for them. They're scheduling up. They're trying to do what they can, but the grossness of the AAC this year is not helping them. UCF is not good, as evidenced by the game we saw this weekend. There's just, I mean, Memphis is a team that people should get excited about, but don't get excited about. There's just nothing really going on there. So it doesn't matter what Bill from the Poughkeepsie Times and Jane from the Walla Walla, Washington penny saver think about it. It's what that dozen plus in that room in Grapevine, Texas are going to see. And I'll be curious once we see those first rankings here, I think right around the beginning of November. Every year the committee has a little bit of a different charter in terms of what they determine being most important, whether it's, well, what's your best loss versus what's your best win versus what's your strength of your conference versus whatever. So until we see really what that committee is putting an emphasis on, it makes for interesting conversation. I love talking about it, but I don't think any of us really have any firm answers because the people who are in charge of that, making that decision, have not met formally yet.
I think Ohio State's best hope is for its defense to continue to improve. And it's not even really a style points thing. It's one of the things that is on that board that the committee likes is being a complete football team. And so like Oklahoma in many of these years is maybe 3rd in offense and 83rd in defense. That's not something that they typically like, but they haven't been able to exclude them because there was nobody obvious there to, put in over them in some of these years. So Oklahoma has still made it. Ohio State's got to improve that defensive profile. They've got to continue to play good defensive football so that now the defense isn't weighing down the overall persona of this team as just an offensive only team. And we're starting to see that they are playing a little bit better in that regard. SMU is a team in the American that's 19th in the country, and they beat TCU. Memphis in that league beat Mississippi State, who was getting some poll votes. I mean, they got destroyed by Alabama this past week. Mississippi State did. Houston, I've watched them play, and they're very impressive. They could give Cincinnati a tough game, and they're only getting a few poll votes, and I believe they only have one loss, 5-1. They lost to Texas Tech. They don't have a signature win to speak of, but that's a team that could very easily win 9 or 10 games right there. Houston, again, beating up on the same American teams that Cincinnati is at this point. But so I'm not going to buy the American, but I'm not going to sell it either. I mean, it's every bit as good as the Pac-12, in my opinion.
That's a low bar.
Well,
damning with faint praise there, I suppose, but it's right there. I mean, it's Power 6. I mean, it, in my opinion, or Power 2, halfway decent 2, and okay 2 at this point. But I don't know. It's all apples and oranges. And man, how cool would it be if Cincinnati and Ohio State did get to play in a semifinal game? That would be cool. The committee's not going to want to have Alabama and Georgia play 7 days again after they played in the championship game. So they'll stilt that so that it's not 1 versus 4, however they want to do it. And, skew Ohio State and Cincinnati one way or the other. And Cincinnati could get relegated down to the 4. But again, is Oklahoma going to run the table? Until this week against TCU, they hadn't beaten a quality team by any kind of a margin. And now I stretch that with TCU. They're probably a 500 team. So I don't know. But a lot of football to be played. Oklahoma's got to beat Oklahoma State, which then raises the question, if Oklahoma State wins and goes 13-0, how do you leave Oklahoma State out? Are they going to lose somewhere along? Very quietly, they've snuck up on everybody and still undefeated in their own right. So I don't know. I just want. I have a conundrum I want to bring up here. Kevin, did you have something you wanted to throw in?
Well, I just wanted to jump in and talk about the craziness of putting too much credit in the AP poll as being a predictor of what we're going to see in terms of the playoff committee. I'm looking at a ballot here out of Fort Wayne, and the good news for Ohio State fans is this voter has Ohio State second. Oh, this guy's a genius. We love him. Then I scroll down. He has Clemson 15th. Clemson 15th in the nation. That's bad. So, you see this great variance, because I saw that Clemson had like 64 points in the poll. And I'm like, how in the God's green earth did they get 64 points? Well, somebody voting them 15th, and then I saw somebody else that had like 17th. I just don't know if people watch. And, I give Steve a lot of credit, who votes in the Football Writers Super 16. I certainly have been in the car with him going through games like, let's kind of talk this through. I certainly hope if I were a voter in any of these that I wouldn't sit there and be putting Clemson 15th this year, because they're horrible.
Yeah. Well, in this week's ballot, I had no qualms putting Iowa below Penn State, even though they beat them head to head, and no qualms putting Oregon well below Ohio State, even though they beat them head to head, because I stayed up till 2 a.m. and I watched the Oregon Cal game, and they needed a stop at 1:48 Eastern time on Saturday morning. They needed a stop at the 1 yard line, an incomplete pass. And when the pass hit the ground, everybody looked around like, no flags, no flags, no flags, no flags. And then they finally celebrated that they got off their home field with a win over a 1-win Cal team. I mean, it was kind of like, you can now exhale. So, yeah, the quarterback didn't play particularly well, Brown, in that game. And yet, I don't know, how he could have done a whole lot more with that offense the way it's constituted right now.